I just pressed record. Welcome everyone to February 13th, 2023 Emergency Cold Weather Shelter Emergency Task Force. Meg was unable to join us today. I'm grateful for everyone who is here. We are going to be reviewing the Anchorage Health Department and the MOA plan for decompression of emergency shelter. It's an opportunity for us all to give input, to digest what is being shared, and to think about what recommendations or next steps might be based on their proposal. I'd also like to acknowledge that our meeting, or I am located on the Upper Inlet Dena'ina Athabascan lands, the unceded territory of the indigenous people of this area. When I am thinking about land acknowledgements, I like to express learning that I am doing. And today I learned that Dena'ina Athabascan people have 4 dialects: the Upper Inlet, the Outer Inlet, Iliamna, and Inland. And I'd like to share a little language with you today, which is falling snow. And it is Yus Nudahi. And I'll put the text in the chat, meaning falling snow of the Upper Inlet Dena'ina Athabascan people. I think about how language is connected to culture, and part of the way that we can understand cultures is to learn the language. And I'm grateful for this meeting on this land today.
Thank you, Owen. So we got a packed agenda today. I appreciate everybody joining us. As Owen said, the primary topic for today is to hear the AHD MOA plan for decompression and exit of emergency shelter. We'll spend the amount of time that's necessary to go through that, so I'll adjust the agenda based on how long that discussion takes. And then we also have an update on some facility site assessments that John Weddleton will share with us. So we definitely, those 2 things are probably our top priority for today. We'll work through the others as time allows. Okay. So with that, I will turn it over to Alexis Johnson with the municipality's Anchorage Health Department. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And then I also am going to forewarn that I am home with 2 children today as well, and we are remote learning. So give me just 1 second.
Perfect. Alexis, we are seeing your screen.
Can you guys see the slideshow now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So today I'm joined by Michael Hughes. He's part of the AHD team. Let me see if I can turn off some closed captioning. And we're going to be presenting today our demobilization proposal. Okay, so for the agenda today, we're going to cover background information on 16.120. That's the triple trigger as far as emergency cold weather shelter, what our current capacity is, what assumptions we have moving forward. We're going to present to you guys a menu of options that are available. We're going to talk about safe sleeping areas and the research that we've done, if that's a route that the municipality is ready to take. And then we're going to talk about the RFP timeline and the expectations around that if we do end up going with a safe sleeping area. So just to give a little background, Anchorage Municipal Code 16.120, to understand the code, emergency shelter is activated for 3 reasons. A civil emergency declared by the mayor, when temperatures drop ambient below 45 degrees Fahrenheit, or when the director determines in writing that a lack of available shelter options otherwise pose a danger to the life and health of unsheltered people within the municipality. The third provision that you guys see on the screen, that's how COVID we continue to operate emergency shelter through COVID, was with a director determination. Right now, our emergency cold weather shelter is activated under the 45 degree Fahrenheit. So just to give you guys a capacity map of what we have through April 30th of this year under the emergency cold weather shelter. We do have Christian Health Associates, which is prioritizing family sheltering. We're seeing an average of 30 guests, or 8 families, I should say, Covenant House is funded through March 31st, and they have 25 additional guests, and those are transition age youth, 18 through 24. And then we currently have 100 people at the Alex Hotel, 360 at the Sullivan, and then we are on a demobilization plan for the Aviator. I believe the last I checked, we had 112 people there. And so you can see the cost that it's costing the municipality through the end of April 30th, and then what our average cost per day is. And then you'll see 566 is the average guest per day that we're seeing accessing congregate and non-congregate sheltering. So these are the assumptions that we were working with moving forward. We know that cold weather sheltering ends under 16.120 as of April 30th, give or take with the temperature. Without a replacement for congregate shelter, we believe that the Sullivan will need to remain open to fill the gap needed of congregate shelter space. And then clients moving into housing. So we have 2 new housing coming online, which is the Barrett Inn. We believe that only about 50 of those units of the 95 will come on by May 1st, and that the Lakeshore will come on with 45 housing units by March 31st. We do have the Golden Lion coming online. Right now, it's a little bit up in the air as far as timeline. We have it somewhere between July and September, and it will need a $700,000 appropriation in order to get it up to code for habitation. This is a new thing that has come online. We had a private donor approach us and say that they would like to purchase the old Alaska Native Charter School and lease it back to the municipality for roughly $100K a month on a 5-year lease agreement. It is zoned properly B3, but it would have to go through the CUP process unless designated under the 16.120. And then we know that some people will decide to camp whether or not shelter is available to them. So these were our assumptions moving in. So let's talk about locations and options. Right now, we have the option for the Alaska Native Charter School as a new navigation center and shelter if we decided to go that route. We believe that it would cost roughly $5.3 million a year for 150 people, about $97 a guest. So we do have 3 new housing options. We talked about the Barrett coming partially online, the Lakeshore, and then the Golden Lion. And then we also have the Aviator beyond April 30th, but it's only 18 rooms, roughly 21 people. And that's our most expensive option, which is $170 per guest. The reason that option is so high is because they still have to maintain staffing levels, no matter how many people are in are accessing those rooms. And so it is a pretty expensive route for us to take. Other than that, you'll see on the screen a safe sleeping site. So this is something we're going to be discussing in later slides. This is going to be a sanctioned camp, but we want to make sure that we learn from what we learned last year and to really make it a municipal homeless response. So we can dive into that a little bit later. We are focusing on maintaining about 150 guests at a safe sleeping site. And that's pretty cost effective at $87.60 per guest per day. So this is the Sullivan Arena. If we look at Sullivan Arena as a 5-month operation through the summer with no warming shelter, if we maintain 150 guests, it's going to be roughly $1.77 million. It's about $77 per guest per day. With the amount of guests going up, the cost per guest actually goes down because of economies of scale. And so if we maintain a 360 guest capacity, which is what we have now, 2 things would have to be enacted. We would have to require 16.120 to be enacted, and we would also have to get assembly approval to continue on beyond the 150 person capacity. And I believe we are fully approved through March 31st as of right now to go beyond the 150 plus 50 capacity. So option 1 that we're going to present. This is an all hands on deck approach. This is the Sullivan Arena, but down to 150 people. So it's going to be a smaller census. We would continue on with the Aviator at 18 rooms. Should I continue?
Yeah, continue.
Okay. The Aviator would continue at 18 rooms, 21 people. We would bring on the 2 new housing units, and then we would offer a safe sleeping site. The only place right now currently within municipal code that allows a safe sleeping site is Centennial Campground. It would require us to have a code change if we wanted to go anywhere else aside from Centennial. Not to say that we are nailed down with Centennial, but we are going to talk about some options today. So overall cost on this program would be $4.3 million, and the guest per day is about $88.30. All right, so option 2, this is continuing the Sullivan Arena at 150 people. This is a smaller site. It would still require the 16.120 to be enacted. It would not have a warming shelter. And this would still offer the housing options at the Lakeshore and the Barrett, and then also an outdoor safe sleeping site. And it would get rid of the non-congregate option. Because the Aviator is so expensive beyond April 30th, this one is a little bit more cost effective. We're looking at $82.36 per day per person and a rough total cost of $3.78 million. Or option 3. So option 3 gets rid of the outdoor safe sleeping site, and it also gets rid of the Aviator. So what this does is we would request an increased capacity to 360 at the Sullivan Arena. Because of the economies to scale, we actually save about $30 per person per day. This would include the 2 housing units, the Barrett and the Lakeshore coming on. But overall, this is the most cost effective, but it would have a maintained capacity of 360 at the Sullivan Arena, and we would have to trigger 16.120. Sorry about that. All right, so I'm going to let Michael talk about safe sleeping areas today.
So hello, everyone. My name is Michael Hughes. I'm the homelessness planning coordinator for the Anchorage Health Departments. And I did some research on safe sleeping areas, and I'm going to present best practices. Next slide, please. So basically, safe sleeping areas are common practice across the US, which are basically defined as allowing individuals experiencing homelessness to camp legally in a city-approved location. Some of the research that I did was from materials from HUD, the US Interagency Council on Homelessness, other cities in the lower 48, case studies, and talking to providers from the lower 48 who have actually implemented safe sleeping areas. Next slide. So some best practices include scattered sites of up to 150 people. So this is capping the number of people who can be in one specific location. The smaller sites create safer and healthier spaces for everyone. Guests would also include any individual or family who wishes to be a part of the safe sleeping area. And as Ms. Johnson mentioned, Centennial is one possibility, but many other cities use parking lots, parks, and just any other open locations. As far as fencing goes, fencing with a single point of access would keep guests safe from wild animals, people who are violent, etc. Just to be really clear, this is for the sake of the guests camping and for their safety. It's a very common practice. In fact, I didn't come across one safe sleeping area that was not fenced in. Fences would also have an alarmed exit and would in theory be on the smaller side so that they don't become so big that the provider can't see all, can't patrol them well enough. For pets, admitting pets would truly create a low barrier space. It's a great option for people experiencing homelessness who have pets and who would otherwise not seek shelter. And the provider would essentially keep everything orderly by providing waste bags and post rules for keeping pets. Next slide. The tent setup is basically to create an organized and safe place and to know where each guest is. So guests would bring their own tents or be offered tents by the provider, and the tents would all open in the same direction if possible. So in the case of Centennial, kind of opening towards the road. In the case of possibly another spot, opening towards other walkways. And each guest would be assigned a 12 by 12 camping site, and that would be numbered and kind of sectioned off. So it's very orderly, and so that the provider knows who is there and where they are. This would also benefit from collaboration between municipal departments and organizations. Some municipal departments include the Anchorage Police Departments, the Anchorage Fire Departments, for an emergency evacuation plan, and the Anchorage Health Department public health nurses who can help understand outdoor sanitation best practices. And of course, collaboration with various nonprofits. And wellness checks. The idea behind wellness checks is if you walk into the Sullivan, you have a great view of what everyone is doing, who might be in crisis, who's okay, who's not okay. But regardless of where a safe sleeping area may be, if people are in tents, you just can't see if someone's okay or not okay. And so the idea is that providers would kind of periodically walk by and would ask simple questions and ask guests to open their tents, but then would not enter tents or ask invasive questions. So we think these would be a great way to make sure that just the guests are safe. Some final points are that laundry services would be provided by a mobile trailer, which would be on site, or by some sort of return service. And then one provider case study, and again, this is just one case study, so it's not a specific recommendation, is that staff ratios worked very well when they were 1 to 15 for guest services practitioners, who basically ensured the health, safety, and comfort of all guests. And then 1 to 20 for care coordinators, who basically helped clients find housing and planned and facilitated activities and events at the site. So that is just one example of a best practice that worked for a provider in the lower 48. The best way to initiate this would be a request for proposal, and there will be more on that later on in the presentation. So well, we received feedback at the subcommittee about having some sort of a town hall or feedback at the Sullivan. And this, in whatever way it would be implemented, would be a way to talk to guests about their summer plans, to give guests options, to see what they prefer, just kind of get a sample of what people are thinking. And we would kind of talk about what a safe sleeping area would be and see what guests would want in order to go there and be safe and happy there. And I think Ms. Johnson was going to continue with this slide.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Okay, so just to give an update on abatement, one of the questions that we're regularly asked is safe sleeping areas, would they add to the total number of shelter beds for the purpose of abatement? The answer is no. They do not qualify under Martin v. Boise as additional shelter space. So we couldn't abate, let's say, Chester Creek Trail or Davis Park, for instance, if we opened up a safe sleeping area in Centennial or somewhere else. So that's a question that we've gotten. And then currently we are not doing abatements, but we are doing city cleanup with Healthy Spaces. And I just want to commend the coalition. Mr. Jason over there, he has regular contact with our Healthy Spaces crew as far as outreach coordination. So there is great coordination between the coalition and the municipality as far as reaching out and getting in contact with people who are experiencing homelessness and seeing what we can offer them as a municipality. All right, so potential code changes that would need to be addressed prior to some of these implementations coming on. If we wanted to have a second safe sleeping site, that's a tongue twister, other than Centennial Campground, it would require a code change for overnight camping. One of the things that we discussed at the subcommittee would be potentially Davis Park, Russian Jack, or the old archive site. And there was some discussions as far as like people already being in Davis Park and the trauma with Centennial. So if there was an option, if we wanted to have two or we wanted to have something aside from Centennial, it would require a code change. Another thing that we get asked about a lot are, can't we just have pallet homes? Why can't we just have a tiny home village? We would require, in order to have that in our city, we would have to have code changes unless it was, I believe, in a manufactured home park. So those are things that we could discuss moving forward. Another big thing that we need to discuss is there's currently not an identified funding source for any of the plans that we have. I don't believe we are able to fund beyond April 30th at this point for any of the congregate or non-congregate shelterings. We just haven't identified a funding source as of yet. And then emergency shelter funds would also need to be found for emergency cold weather sheltering October through December of 2023, as all the 2023 alcohol homeless funds have been allocated. Just to give a brief overview, if we do decide to go with a safe sleeping area, we would need to put out an RFP for an operator. This would be a municipal homeless response, and it would take a minimum of 17 weeks. 4 weeks to develop the scope of work, evaluation questions, evaluation criteria, 2 weeks to get it through City Hall to make necessary changes by purchasing legal and risk, and then 4 weeks, ideally 6 to 8 if we could, to get it posted and open for applications. And then once that is posted, open and closed, 3 weeks to receive the applications, vet them, and get them in front of the committee. It would take 2 to 3 weeks for a recommendation for the award, and then obviously 2 weeks to get through the City Hall and get it executed. Other than that, that's our presentation for today. If anyone has any questions, feel free to let us know.
Thank you, Alexis and Michael. Appreciate that. Do we have anyone that was at the committee meeting last week that wants to maybe speak on behalf of that committee?
So I'm the staff person with ACEH, and we had a really great conversation. A lot of the things that the subgroup kind of talked about with the health department you saw those changes already in the slides. We did not want to make any recommendations because truly the Emergency Shelter Task Force itself, the larger group, needs to make a recommendation. And the recommendation could be that more information is needed at this time. I know for us, one of the things we asked were, what are the areas for the safe sleeping? If in fact we were going to have safe sleeping as an option. Boy, that is a tongue twister, Alexis. There's a lot of in there. So, really it is, and we can't kind of tell the municipality where to make investments at this point as far as, where that can go. But I really encourage people on this call to ask those questions, that maybe there's something that we missed. A lot of the things that we did ask were already reflected, so I don't really feel the need to go back through that, Belinda, since it has already been addressed. But if I welcome more feedback, and then I do have a couple of questions for the entire task force after those questions and comments.
Thanks, Taria. Appreciate you kicking off the conversation. Anybody online, if you have a question or comment, could you raise your hand so we can recognize who is wanting to engage? I don't see any hands raised right now. Who has questions or comments? And Owen, can you recognize the folks who have their hands raised maybe better than I can?
Yeah, I'll monitor the chat for folks who might not be able to unmute themselves as well. John, you are first up, and then Jessica, you are after John.
Yeah, just on Alexis's point that the safe sleeping area cannot count for abatement, which seems probably somewhat true. But in Missoula, they opened up just over a year ago a sanctioned camping site. And they also completely banned camping anywhere else. So they say, if you want to camp, that's where you go. So it's been over a year. They're in the same court district that we're in, so under the same rules. But apparently they're doing that very overtly. Did you look into that and see if, what the status is?
Thanks, John. I'm gonna ask Michael to do a little bit of research on that. Maybe he has, but from our municipal law department, that was the guidance that we were offered. We're not supposed to say per law, but that was the offer, or that was what was offered to us. They just said, hey, this is not a shelter bed and therefore cannot be used as a abatement tool. So I can have Michael get with our law department and see if there's any case law that goes against that ruling.
Okay, and I'll email you some contacts. I had some conversations with them last year.
Yeah, so John, just really quickly on that too. I didn't do any like super in-depth like legal analysis of this, but there was some sort of policy think tank or something, like the Homelessness Law Policy Center, like something along the effect of that, which specifically said that with these sort of like safe sleeping areas would not count as shelter beds. But at the same time, I'm not a legal expert, and I would love to do a little bit more research and get with our legal departments.
Yeah, and it could just be no one has sued Missoula yet. So I don't know. I'm just sharing what I learned when I was down there.
I think Jessica?
Thanks. And I saw Taria's note in the chat, which actually is in line with the question I was about to ask too. And I don't know if this is a question for Alexis or a question for Michael, but could you outline a little bit in the concept of a safe sleeping area? What are you thinking, or what is being proposed as the services that would be provided? I know you talked about the staffing ratios, but can you talk a little bit more about services on site, or would it just be supervision of that? And then also just mentioning that there was a letter that was sent last summer when Centennial was opened with some of the recommendations of the COC on how a sanctioned camp could be managed.
Michael, I'm going to let you take lead on this one.
Sure. So basically the vision was, and I'm not personally an expert on exactly like how the Sullivan is run, but the idea was that all the services that are provided at the Sullivan would also be offered at the safe sleeping area. So we would really want to make it a true homeless response. And it wouldn't just be, you know, making sure everyone is safe. It would be providing like meals, like showers, laundry services, and then like peer support in the same way that all the details work at the Sullivan, just outside and adapted to that new environment.
So there's two questions in the chat. John, your hand is back up, and Jessica, your hand is back up. John, did you have a follow-up? Oh, okay.
No,
And Jessica,
I'm down. Thanks.
Jessica, did you have a follow-up before I read the questions in the chat?
I did. So hearing you mention those particular services, would the cost to provide services at a safe sleeping area that wasn't Centennial Park vary widely from the proposed estimate for Centennial, since Centennial does have bathrooms and showers on site already? So would there be an additional cost for sites that are not Centennial?
Yeah, Jessica, so when we did our initial comparison, Centennial was the most cost effective because the bathrooms and the showers were on site. But that's not to say that we couldn't have a secondary site or an alternative site, and possibly a smaller site. The cost that we anticipated had a $500,000 request for a fence, and that was to fence in Centennial, which I believe there's also a code change that might have to occur with that. We didn't get a clear answer on that. But if we had a smaller footprint, the cost would go down even if we had to add bathrooms or a shower trailer. So it's kind of, I mean, if we identify a site today that's not Centennial, we could definitely get a cost estimate by end of week just to see where it would fall on the scale.
Okay, thank you.
There are there's two questions in the chat, and then Roger will go to you just to keep the order of folks who are in line. I also just want to differentiate between providing basic hygiene services and services. Basic hygiene needs like showers or laundry or food, I would not consider services under federal best practices. Services would be assistance to find housing, applications for IDs, case management, care coordination with mental health services or behavioral health services. And so yeah, that's a question I have. Alexis, I see your hand up if you want to answer it or talk it through with me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Owen. So those costs are going to be pretty across the board. They're based on per person. We would have those readily available, whether it was at Sullivan or Centen or anywhere else, whether it was congregate, non-congregate, or a safe sleeping site. Those costs would pretty much be what they are. As far as increased costs, if we go anywhere outside of Centennial, there will be increased costs for bathrooms, shower, those basic hygiene needs. But we've already like pre-planned for the services to be there, the housing navigators, the mental health support, the peer support, stuff like that. So I do appreciate the commentary, and I just want to make sure that yes, we are differentiating between basic human needs and actual homelessness resources that come secondary. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure wraparound services meant that other stuff too. From David Rittenberg, we have, is there a proposed site identified for the safe sleeping area?
Yeah, thanks so much, David. So right now, the only one that is allowed by code is Centennial. That's not to say that Centennial has to be the answer for a safe sleeping site. We did have some discussions on, where do people want to camp? Where are they currently camping? That's where the Davis Park commentary came in. And also Rush and Jack, we know that when we go out and we meet people during outreach, that's where they like to camp. And so the question is why do they like to camp there? Maybe we can open a safe sleeping site there. If they're already there, then we don't have to move people. We can just bring wraparound services to them. And so that discussion has been had. There hasn't been a proposed site that has been identified. The only one that is currently allowable by code is Centennial.
Did that answer your question, David, or do you have any follow-ups?
Thank you.
Okay. Robert Hakama asks, is there an updated timeline for getting the Golden Lion ready?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. So the Golden Lion is currently being worked on using M&O operational dollars. There will need to be an appropriation that comes forward. Where that appropriation funding source comes from, that is up in the air as of right now, or at least I have not been read into it. But they gave us a rough estimate of 6 to 9 months. I've been pushing for it. I want to turn it on sooner than later. I'd preferably, if it has to be on that timeline, I'd prefer it right before emergency cold weather shelter is activated so we could get those 85 rooms online. But to the best of my knowledge and to what I have been read in on, 6 to 9 months, preferably 6, is the latest update.
Thanks, Alexis. Roger Branson.
Hey, thank you. So I was just curious about, Alexis said that we would not be able to abate people into a designated camp or a safe sleeping area. What's going to keep people from camping right adjacent to the safe sleeping area, and that becoming an issue for the safe sleep area?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. So one of the things that we talked about is we know that people are going to camp. We obviously know that. We want to offer the best and safest area so that people want to be in that area. And so they want to get resources. And if they don't and they want to camp somewhere else outside of a safe sleeping area, we're just going to have to continue to meet people where they are and discuss with them their options and what their choices are and how we can either get them into a shelter or into a safe sleeping area where we can continue to provide food and resources and anything that they need to get their step out of homelessness. So there's nothing as far as what our plans are if they want to camp elsewhere aside from a safe sleeping area, if that's the route we so choose. But we're going to continue to offer them services no matter what, no matter where they're sleeping.
So my concern is that individuals who might see the opportunity to predate on the folks in the safe sleeping area, camping right adjacent to them or on the path that they have to walk to get back and forth to stores or whatever. And I'm assuming that, like we did at Sullivan, we just identify when that happens and fix it. It was we had some issues on the trail and whatnot, and APD did step up and some of the folks were dealt with. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Just to add to that, I think that was one of the benefits or one of the requests for the fence around the safe sleeping area, so we could see who was coming and going and to make sure there was no predatory behavior for people who wanted to access those people. So thanks for the question. Thanks for the comment.
Yes, thank you.
There's a question about the Arctic Rec Center, but as we have it on the agenda later, Julie, I think we should revisit it then. Taria, you have your hand up.
Thank you. So the other thing that I just remembered looking back at my notes is we talked about how having the rental assistance is really a necessary component of this demobilization plan, however it is. And Alexis, if you can just maybe tell the broader group about where those ERA funds are at this moment with AHFC. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is we're looking at a list of folks that are, currently experiencing homelessness, and a lot are lacking income, which means that even though we have the Barrett or the Golden Lion or the Lakeshore come online, they still need rental assistance in order to access those facilities, as those facilities are housing and not shelter. So you do have to pay rent and hold a lease. And those are very important things. So just wanting to give Alexis that chance to loop everybody into the conversation we had. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Taria. So I spoke with AHFC last week, and they are in the final stages of meeting with their sub-grantees. There was a list of about 10 grantees that were used in the first round of ERA funds. And so they're going to continue on with those programs through those same grantees. They have reached out to them, and those grantees, excuse me, will have to get back to them before February 17th. I believe that's Friday, to let them know if they can bring on, any more bandwidth as far as placing people and getting people signed up for ERA and their reporting structure. And so everyone will have until, everyone will have until February 17th to get back to Alaska Housing Finance, let them know if they do have the bandwidth to start this program, and then we'll be up and running hopefully by the beginning of next week for people to apply through those grantees.
David Rittenberg from Catholic Social Services has a follow-up. They say, I'm sorry if I missed this, but was there any mention of size and scale? How many campsites or people would it be intended to serve? And I think this is a follow-up to the safe sleep areas.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. So we spoke with, and I should say Michael spoke with, not we, but our group spoke with sanctioned camping and safe sleeping areas across the country. And the words that we got back were nothing bigger than 150 because it's outdoors and it is considered like a non-congregate where you're not seeing like this vast group of people and they're in individual tents. They actually told us the smaller, the better. We spoke with some people who had safe sleeping sites for 18 people, 56 people, 83 people. And so their recommendation was the smaller, the better. We also talked with the Parks and Rec department, and we know from Centennial last year that there were some days where there was a lot of people there and they had recommended 150 just to stay with the code. So we came to the consensus of about 150 people. And then if we wanted to offer a secondary one, we could downsize the original and then just make 2 to make up 150 people. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Taria, your hand is up.
This is the problem when you look back at your notes. So one of the other things we had that came up was about how to protect those experiencing homelessness from the weather. Last year, when it was Centennial, we had a lot of rain last summer, if you can consider it a summer, and folks were very wet. The ground was wet and soggy. And so one of the things, and Alexis, you or Michael, whoever can jump in and say if I'm saying it wrong, but my recollection of our conversation on Friday is that there would be some kind of shelter or pavilion or something that you could possibly erect, and you would look into that more to make sure that those folks are staying dry, because just in the tent, if we have yet another wet summer, then they're still exposed to those elements. And that was a concern. And we were reacting instead of being proactive last year. Or extreme heat. Doesn't have to be just rain, just that, pummeling sun is another issue. So if you want to speak to that possibility, I know we talked on Friday.
So I can at least speak to like the specific tent situation. So unfortunately, it's not going to be like allowed in code at Centennial. But like the best national best practice would be to give everyone kind of like some sort of like a small platform to put their tent on, which would stop rainwater from kind of like seeping in. That apparently works very well in places that are even more in theory rainy than here, like Seattle and things like that. And you'll see that in their program guide to how to do things, even just something simple like a platform. But unfortunately, it seems like that won't be possible by code. Alexis, did you want to speak to any of the possible alternatives or something like a pavilion?
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael. So one of the things that we discussed were, and this still has to be run through the building department, but it was discussed, was possibly using the temporary placement of the ASD portables that have been made available to us, possibly for feeding or for like a day engagement center or hangout or a resource center on the footprint. We're still looking into if code allows it or if we would require a code change just to place a temporary structure. If we do go with Centennial, because it's parkland, we'd have to look into that deeper. But yeah, so we have the option of putting up portables. One of the things that we had heard back was that pallets, when you put things on pallets, it's considered like a structure. And so that would require a code change, I believe. But we haven't gotten a full answer on it, and I'm still pushing for a yes. So those are just two options that we have to keep people out of the elements if they do choose to camp.
There's a hand up, Taylor Donovan.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Thanks, Alexis and team. This has been super informative and helpful. I may have missed this at the beginning. I had to step out for a moment, but is this considered the primary replacement option for Sullivan and other temporary non-congregate shelters, or is this part of a menu of options that clients will be able to choose from over the summer?
Thanks so much, Taylor. So yeah, our conclusion that we came to is that unless there is a new congregate shelter option, the Sullivan will have to be maintained through summer unless a new option comes online. We did have a private donor reach out to us and say that they would acquire the Alaska or the Old Alaska Native Charter School over off of Bragaw, and that they could close in about 45 days. And we could open at that facility, but it would require a lease, and it's actually a little bit more expensive than just continuing on with the Sullivan at the same number of people. And I believe with the Old Alaska Native Charter School, we would only have about 150 people there versus the Sullivan, where we could hold up to or shelter up to 500 people if the need arose. So I think the best option would be to maintain the Sullivan through the summer. And so unless we have a new congregate sheltering option, the Sullivan would be the recommendation. I don't want to say that Centennial or an outdoor safe sleeping area would be in lieu of a congregate shelter, but it would just be an option for the people that we know are not going to stay in shelter during summer. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure Centennial was not the only option. It sounds like Sullivan or another congregate would also be an option throughout the summer. So thanks for working on this.
Yep.
Thanks, Taylor. I just have a comment, which just seems like the options right now are maintaining the Sullivan, Centennial as a way of sanctioned camping or safer camping, and that potentially the former Native Charter School, which would cost $100,000 a month in rent, which is a $1.2 million a year just in rent outside of the operations. And it feels like we're kicking the can down the road. It's what we have currently plus Centennial, and the long-term need of a permanent congregate shelter is unaddressed by this plan, or would still need to be developed over the summer. It's a permanent need that we've identified in the gap analysis. And this might get us more safely through summer or a transition, but there's still like a big question mark for me about just this gap of 200 congregate shelter bed needs that the Sullivan can provide, but is not the best facility to be provided. Taylor, your hand is still up. I don't know if you have a question.
That is because I cannot figure out how to put it down, Owen. I'm
I
on
can
my
put it
phone.
down
Sorry,
for
folks.
you. And Alexis, it's not a question for you to answer. It's really a comment of me processing just this information right now.
Hey, Alexis, we had a request to put the options back up on the screen. I think now that we're talking about them, people would like to look at them again and make sure they understood them. Could you show those pages from your presentation again?
Yes, if you could just give me 2 minutes to find it somewhere on my screen, I will do that for you.
Alexis, if you're doing other stuff and can't show it, if you email it to me, I can also show it.
Thanks, Alexis.
Can you guys see it?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
So this is the overall, and I just want to show that it says Sullivan Arena capacity dependent. That's our next slide on here. So.
Are there any other questions or general feedback on the different options that were just presented? If there's not any more discussion on this, then I do want to move on so that we have time to talk about the other facility site assessments, but I don't want to close this conversation until you guys have all your questions out. Taria?
Can you, Alexis, move the slides to the Lord today, to the ones where you have like option 1, 2, and 3? I think those were the options. Here, I do want to point out that the safe sleeping area says 150. I know that you said that that could be dispersed and scattered site is maybe the word I would use right now. But that's going to cost $2.7 million for the 5 months. Is that what you're saying for that slide? That's my one question. If somebody else has a question, I hear you. And Belinda, can I just ask my another question then? Okay.
Yes.
And I don't know if you know this, Alexis, but you stopped sharing, so I didn't get to see options 1, 2, or 3. Oh, she left.
She must have accidentally exited. We'll let her back in.
I don't even know if she heard my question, but she might have.
I did hear your question. I'm so sorry. I meant to end the presentation, but I ended this call. Yes, so the 150, that was just the basic like overview of what we chose, but yes, you could have 2 scattered sites with 75 each or whatever the will of this body is.
Julie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, my wondering is the Russian Jet area you're talking about, is that where the old campground was?
Julie, I don't know where the old campground is, but I believe that is the site. I think,
It's
but I
along
can double check.
Debar.
Yes.
Yeah, North Russian Jet Akdabar. Boniface. Yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm on that just to make sure we're talking about the same place. I don't want to give you misinformation.
All right, thanks.
And Taria, your hand was up, but I
was just trying to give other people a chance to ask questions or comments, so I apologize. But I do have something when, giving other people a chance. Okay, well, hearing none, I'll just go ahead if that's okay, Owen. Okay. So then the question, and I know that I don't believe this came up in the subgroup, But it was something that we had a conversation afterwards, which is if you have 2 sites open, how do you guys envision who is going to be chosen for each site? Like how do you know Johnny goes to Centennial or Mary goes to Sullivan, or what does that look like, or a non-congregate option?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Taria. I think as far as like a vision for me goes, I think we would just put out an RFP to manage both sites, just for ease of knowing the clientele and where they're going and connecting them with other options like the Sullivan Arena or BFS. But I would think that we would put out an RFP for just one RFP for both sites. Is that what you envision, Taria, or did you guys have any comments on why that would be a good or bad idea?
So I guess I'm thinking more not, what do you call that? Not provider, because I did see in your slides you do an RFP, which is wonderful. It's a competitive process, but more of the person's experiencing homelessness. What makes that difference? And I mean, one of the options, of course, because you're speaking to ACH, would be to utilize CE. And then, of course, Owen says that client choice. But if you're like, what makes it to where this person, you know, is out, literally, even though it's a safe sleeping area, it is still outside. So you're outside versus being inside in a congregate area. So that's just something maybe for your group to think on and consider as you move forward. But I didn't expect an answer now.
Yeah, Taria, I can get on that with Michael and see if we can come to a conclusion on what best practice would be.
So as we're winding down a bit on the energy for this discussion at this moment, I'm wondering for the task force, would you like a little more time to be able to soak on this? And if so, are you interested in meeting again on the 20th, which I think would be next Monday, to reconvene and then propose any recommendations that the task force would want to make? So I guess I'm looking for the task force members to give some feedback on that option.
And can I just jump in really quick? Taria, I know that we are scheduled, and I believe Felix is on here if I saw him. I believe we're scheduled to present at the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting on Wednesday. I don't know if you guys would like us to request a week delay on that so that we can meet with the task force one more time to before we present to the Housing and Homelessness Committee, or maybe Felix can jump in, or Taria.
So I think we talked, is that okay, Owen, before I jump for Felix? Okay, thanks, or Belinda. So I think what we talked about at the subgroup committee is really giving some opportunity for more feedback because maybe we're missing something. So having the presentation on Wednesday probably would be great as you have it now. And then asking the task force to come back. And I heard somebody in the chat say the 20th is a holiday, but having them come back. And by then, you know, more things might change, or maybe they won't from, you know, your Wednesday meeting. And then you would meet with, I think, the COC or the AC, sorry, the advisory council, I believe, on the 23rd. We are, and just so everybody can kind of understand my frame of like timeline or reference is, although this conversation probably should have started in December, we are doing pretty well and we're still having and engaging in this conversation. And so being able to meet again and again and really drill down this plan and keeping this momentum is what I feel is the most necessary, and keeping this on the forefront of everybody's mind. So that's all I have to say about it.
A comment from Roger Branson that yes, reconvening and time to consider the proposal. And there's another comment from Taylor Donovan pointing out that the 20th is a holiday for most, and that could be a difficult date for reconvening. If there is the need for a recommendation to come out at a later time, is there an alternate date that would work for folks? It would be great to identify that in this meeting rather than a doodle poll of 60 people with only 20 coming. So my preference, if we can identify that future date today's meeting, we would know what it is, whether it's next Monday or an alternate time.
Could we propose that it be moved to the Tuesday if Monday's a holiday?
There's agreement in the chat. Could everyone meet at the same time next Tuesday from 11:30 to 1 to discuss a recommendation regarding the demobilization plan or decompression plan?
Taria, you're on mute.
Sorry. No, thank you. I have no comment.
Yeah, Jessica, we would still keep the presentation to the assembly on Wednesday as Taria recommended. That's kind of what the thought process has been, is we'd go ahead and do that, be able to get any feedback from that session that could then feed into the next task force discussion. Okay. Okay, not seeing anyone saying that Tuesday's going to be a problem. Unless we see a bunch of folks speak up right now saying they are not available on that Tuesday, I think we're going to go move forward and get this meeting set up for next Tuesday. I actually had Monday already on my calendar, so maybe you can just move it to Tuesday. I think it was sent out by either Owen or Taria. Okay. Okay. So with that, I appreciate everybody's time and patience in going through that. Alexis and Michael, thanks so much for putting your presentation together. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda and ask John Weddleton to give us an update on the facility site assessments that have been done. And I think it's primarily, well, John, I'll let you speak to it.
Sure. Let me try screen sharing here just to get people up to date. And if I don't, Taria, I emailed that spreadsheet. Is that something you could put up if I can't?
I can if you'd like. I have it ready. Yeah. You want it?
Not yet. Looks like, let's see if I can do it. Okay, here. Sorry. Do you have a picture of the Tudor Elmer site up?
Yes.
Okay. So just to get people a little oriented, this is the Tudor Elmer site, sometime probably late summer. In this structure would go here to the right. And then this is an area that was cleared. And it kind of, it feeds a little bit into that idea of a sanctioned camping site. This possibly could be available for that. This is a picture from sometime in the summer from a different angle, but this shows a little bit, and Alexis would know better, but kind of the state of the facility now. I think not too long after this was taken, work got shut down. But the plan would be to extend this concrete on either side as high as that rebar and then load up a bunch of gravel. So to get a facility here, it still needs quite a bit of site work. The Arctic Rec Center, and actually we're here to compare the Tudor Elmer site with Arctic Rec Center, though I think we should keep in mind a bit, I don't have my comparison of the old Native Charter School that we done last fall, but it would be an interesting comparison, Arctic Rec Center and that Native Charter School. So kind of hold that in your heads while we go through this. This is an aerial of the Arctic Rec Center. So this is Arctic on the left. This is the facility there now, and you can see this open field, to the east of it, which again, this is all zoned R3, residential multifamily. We'll go through it, but it would require a rezone if this were used as a shelter to PLI. But this area that is open could stay R3 and potentially be sold or used for, through some mechanism for low income, shelter of some sort, or perhaps, through the process code change for an authorized camping site as well. So anyway, so that's kind of just to give you a visual, and I will go to spreadsheet that does a comparison. And let's see how I do that. Don't go far, anyone. Okay, screen share. Does it do it? Window. Here we go. Share. I'm sorry, Windows is giving me all kinds of great information here. Okay. So this, the date here says 10/20/22, which is the last time we presented this, and not much has changed. I added a small amount of additional information, but I think that's good news in a way, because the Arctic Rec Center, as of last week, was still for sale. We've got, and I'll just scroll down this, and then I think afterwards talk about some comparisons. So the land size, Arctic Rec Center, 720,000 square feet, and Elmore area somewhat more. Building size on the Arctic Rec Center, the sales sheet for it said 26,000. We'd been talking about 23,000 previously, so I'm not exactly sure what the difference is there, but it still gives you rough order magnitude, and that's very comparable to the Sprung shelter, which is planned at 26,000 square feet. Zoning, as I said, was, oh, I'm sorry, let me go up one more. Okay, we need some modifications of the Arctic Rec Center to make it work, and the Tudor Elmore site, was presumably, built, ready to go, at least with the structure. Zoning's R3 at Arctic Rec Center, it's PLI at Tudor Elmore. So that, as far as zoning goes, is ready. And R3, that can take quite a while to rezone. We could short circuit that briefly if it were needed through, I think, Title 16, but ultimately it would have to go through a rezone, and that's a good 6 months or so. We looked at transit. Both are near transit. There's a bus stop right at the Arctic Rec Center. The Arctic Rec Center is not fenced, and that can be expensive depending on how much you do. If you did the whole property, it'd be immense. If you just did around the existing facility, it'd be quite a lot less. And the Tudor Elmore is largely fenced. Does it meet health and safety standards? Both of them would. Utilities available? Yes. And the Arctic Rec Center has utilities, of course, to the existing building, and it has a water line at the east end of the property as well. So if anything were built over there, there's good access to utilities throughout. Space for surge, there is at both of those, and with the thinking that 150 would be the baseline. Purchase Arctic Rec Center, 12.6 million. We've already owned the Tudor Elmore site. The tenant improvements at Arctic Rec Center are unknown. We've got, and Alexis, you can jump in and correct these numbers, but roughly we've got 15 million was considered the 15.4 for the Sprung shelter, and some amounts already been done. As we saw in the photo, there's some amount of the site work done, clearing the trees and starting the foundation. And that could be a substantial amount of money off of this at this point. Availability, it says January 23, which of course won't happen right now. But each of these, I think the Arctic Rec Center, if we closed on it, it could be occupied much quicker than the shelter, which still needs quite a bit of work. Pending costs, and these are from the fall. So shipping the structure up here, 200,000. I think we're spending now 5,000 a month to store it. Hickle, pending cost storage, I guess if it's up here, it'd be a smaller amount. So I'm not 100% sure on what the status on these are. We've got that 4.9 million, which is what became a point of dispute. So those numbers aren't totally current. Additional costs, and this total here, 47,000 for the Arctic Rec Center and 3 million for the Tudor Elmore is the cost that will kind of roll through here. So we don't know furniture costs, increased number of showers. There are showers at the Arctic Rec Center because they have 2 gyms, but probably need to increase it. Similar at the Tudor Elmore site, we don't know the amount. Number of toilets at the Arctic Rec Center. They've got I'm sorry I don't have that noted here. I might elsewhere, but they do have a number of toilets because, with the gym, they had the showers and toilets, and they had men and women's. What would a rezone cost? About $37,000 at Arctic Rec Center. Conditional use permit, another $10,000, and this Tudor Elmore, I believe, already has their conditional use permit, so that's already done. Fencing's unknown. Then we go through. If you look to the right here, costs that are probably already sunk costs for the Tudor Elmer site, for architects, civil engineering, all the variety of things there, mechanical. I think these are probably largely already taken care of. So a lot of that total up there for Tudor Elmer, the $3 million, has probably already been expended or close to it. And Alexis, if you know more, certainly let me know. Operating costs. We've got utilities just under its current use, so these would probably change somewhat. The Arctic Rec Center does have laundry, though it would have to be beefed up for 150 people. We don't know the utilities for the Tudor Elmer site. God, I guess here was an estimate, $120,000 per year. Grounds maintenance, things like that, we don't fully know. Operating costs, they should be similar between the two, same number of people, similar use. So this is 4.6 million total, would probably be similar at both locations. Okay, so there's some summary. Okay, here we have some things. The Arctic Rec Center has a family restroom, staff restroom, 2 men's and 2 women, showers for 4 men and 4 women. There's 4 separate meeting rooms, a staff office with 3 desks. There are cameras throughout, and I'm sure that'll be similar to Tudor Elmore. It's all AD accessible. It's really it's a beautiful building. It's new. On-site parking, 150 spaces. There's no parking requirement now, so that's far more than would be needed for a shelter, I think. Nearby medical facility, of course, Tudor Elmore is across from Providence and the Native Health Center. The Arctic Rec Center is right across just to the east is the Neighborhood Health Center. So it's very, very close. It's a little bit closer to a grocery, the Arctic Rec Center, than the Tudor Elmer site. Distance from Neighborhood to the north of the Arctic Rec Center is multifamily residences. And then just across the street are mostly single family homes and probably I think there's some duplexes, maybe some fourplexes. Does it provide dispersion of facilities? And we're looking at this, is it not downtown? And it is not downtown, neither one is. Property taken off tax rolls, no, this is owned by a church, so it's not taxed, similar with the Tudor Elmer site. Uncertainty of increased costs. Arctic Rec Center, we would know the dollars pretty much. It's fairly certain. The Tudor Elmore is probably more certain now than it was back in October, but there's still enough unknowns there because it's not built and you can always run into things as you move forward. Is the location attractive to clients? This is something we could all debate. It's not really, neither one is in the kind of core of where we see people congregating, but neither one is desperately far away either. Wetlands, none on the Arctic Rec Center. Oop. I don't know if you guys can still see it. I'm getting, I lost sight of my screen here.
I can see, we can see it.
You can see it? Okay, well, I can't scroll down it. So, I don't know what's going on here. I'm getting a circle of death. Let me.
We can see the wetlands, and we see everything to the end, which is wetlands, and then year built, laundry service, and displace of other users.
Okay, so I guess so. You see, and Taria, if I can't get back on, you've got it, you could share it. But it's interesting. The both sites can work. Tudor Elmore done obviously would be, specifically made for it, and the Arctic Rec Center could be. We did a tour through it, and the 2 large gyms are big open areas that could be converted fairly easily. It's a gorgeous building. But another comparison as we look is think, how does this compare? So I think, Alexis, I didn't catch who was thinking of buying and then leasing back the Native Charter School. But when we had looked at that, it had a huge amount of work to be done inside. And then the fact that it was broken up into classrooms for, kind of a non-congregate shelter, or for a congregate shelter, would be a problem, because you'd have a lot of staffing costs to monitor the building. So it would be real interesting to compare. I think that was about $5 million, but they may be considering dropping the price. I think they are, to buy, which is about a third of what the Arctic Rec Center would be. But if you look at the ultimate rebuild cost, I don't know, but it's something I think should be looked at before any agreement with using the old Native hospital or a Native charter school location. So anyway, that's my presentation. Feel free to answer questions or ready to discuss.
Thanks, John. Does anybody have any questions?
There was a question from earlier in the chat from Julie Green Graham. Julie, I'm going to try and scroll up and find the question. Oh, and it was about the Arctic Rec Center property. And just a comment that it could be used as year-round emergency shelter, as well as a potential site for safe sleep. And there is land to build low-income housing. So that cost of 12 million could be offset potentially by selling it to a developer willing to develop low-income housing along the site, or other ways.
Those are all true. Well, I think Alexis pointed out, to do camping there would take some kind of code change and perhaps a rezone.
Any other comments or questions for John?
John, the buyer was not named. It was a unknown party.
Okay, thanks.
So John, what are your thoughts on next steps for this? For the site, for the assessment itself?
We have a lot of information, and I think it would take, at this point, the municipality deciding to pursue Arctic Rec Center. I don't know what's been done as far as that, and start talking to the sellers, and maybe negotiating a price. I mean, it's a beautiful building, but I imagine the market for it is quite small, and then start looking at possibly what to do with the excess land. You could cut the cost substantially selling it. It's an incredible location. My understanding is it is buildable. It's not, without a huge amount of. I think some of the areas, some of the structures in that area had to deal with a lot of peat. And my understanding, there's not substantial peat, and that would have to be double checked. But the sellers were telling us that that was not such an issue where they are. So that could be very valuable land for residential. But I think that's it. The administration needs to look at it, and I think that they've got someone talking about that Native Charter School, is get that group to look at this as well, perhaps, and say, look, maybe this works better. Better facility, and perhaps ultimately lower redevelopment costs. Will certainly lower redevelopment costs.
And John, am I correct in remembering that the 550 Burgaw property is one that we did the detailed engineering assessment back in late 21 with Boutte Company?
We did. Yeah, so we've got some good information on that. And I'm sorry,
yes,
I have it in my home computer. I don't have it here.
Okay, so just Alexis, I don't know if you were familiar with that, but there is a detailed engineering study on that that's public, in the public venue, but I can also help you find a copy of it if it's something you'd like to look at.
Yeah, thanks, Belinda. If you could send that in an email, that'd be great for me.
Yeah, I'll send you the it's a big file, but I'll tell you where to find it.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Okay,
John,
anything else?
on mute if you had a follow-up comment. There was just a lot of background noise. So if you have a follow-up comment, you just got to unmute yourself, John.
Okay, Taria, you have a comment?
So, and I just want to make sure this isn't, and this, if this is where you were going, Belinda, you can just take control of it and I'll be quiet. But wondering if there's consensus amongst the task force to recommend that the policymakers and or the administration truly look into this. And I know we made this recommendation before, but I don't think that we highlighted that we really thought that this would be an alternative for knowing the gap analysis has a gap of 221 shelter beds, that this would fill at least 150 plus possibly with assembly approval, plus a 50 bed gap. So a 200 bed gap out of the 221 if we had this as a permanent year-round low barrier shelter. So just seeing if there is an appetite for a consensus on that moving forward from this group. And Belinda, you can maybe say it better than I did.
Yep, I think that was a great question. I think that's a great question to pose now. Maybe we could put it on the agenda for next Tuesday. That'll give people a little bit of time to soak on this as well. Okay. So that's what we'll have next week's meeting will be 2 primary agenda items. It'll be a task force considering recommendations on the shelter demob decompression plan and on a potential recommendation for further analysis of the Arctic Rec Center by the municipality. I'll put those on the agenda for next Tuesday. With the 11 minutes we have left, my intention is just to quickly probe on the last 2 topics on the agenda, unless somebody has something that's more urgent than getting those updates. I'm just going to pause for a second. Does anybody have anything urgent that needs to be on the agenda in the next 10 minutes before I go through the rest? Okay, so I'm just gonna probe real quickly. Is there any update on the funding for the transition age youth? I believe, is that part of what's coming in an appropriation request to the Assembly next week? Anybody know? I think that's the case.
Belinda, I can step in. Yes, so Covenant House was added to the appropriation request, but the request was only for 90 days, not for the original 120. So it's only funded through March 31st. If the Assembly approves the appropriation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Alexis. I appreciate that. So then on subcommittee updates and priorities, I'll name each one, and if you've got an update, speak up. If you don't, I will just move right past it. So is there any update from the capacity planning subcommittee?
We did give our update. That was the one from Friday. Thank you.
Any update from the data group? Anything from the overall system interaction group? I'm sorry, Robert, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I couldn't make my way to the hand quick enough. Not a big one. I just want to say that we are sort of modeling off of the Committee on Housing and Homelessness from the Assembly to try and create a drawdown schedule. We appreciate the one that and the options that Alexis has provided, but we're still going to continue to try and do data-driven work to see what happens to our unsheltered number as different shelters begin demobilizing and moving around. And we're going to continue to do that work, possibly presenting a little bit of that as either as soon as Wednesday or, depending on what we do, possibly the meeting afterwards. So no big updates, just that we're keeping up.
Thank you. Do you think so you're saying you might be ready to present at the meeting next Tuesday as well?
We're hoping so, if that's correct, okay. Taria.
We'll put that on the agenda then. Okay, overall system interaction. Any update from that group?
Yes, so we are working on a better date to meet. So please, if you're on that committee, look out for that next doodle poll. We didn't get the participation that we needed this month, and we know everybody's super busy. So we'll try to book like 2 weeks out and hopefully that'll free up some schedules. Okay. And that would be to do the system mapping, which is really a priority, especially as we're looking at the demobilization plans.
Thanks, Taria.
There's
Let's
a
see.
question in the chat from Nancy Burke from United Way. Is that emergency shelter funding the appropriation that will be on the Assembly agenda on 2/21? And is there a need for testimony on that item? And I believe this is in reference to transition age youth. Is that correct, Nancy?
So the answer is yes, that is based on what we just said, that will be part of the appropriation on the 21st in front of the Assembly. Does anybody have feedback on whether testimony is needed on that item? Not seeing a response, Nancy. I think that might be something to follow up on outside of this discussion. Thanks for the question.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question, Belinda, to see if
Sure.
is this specifically, Nancy, about the Covenant House TAY money, or is this about something else? Did I miss that? I'm sure she's typing feverishly. So I do remember in another conversation. Oh, go ahead if Nancy is ready. Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I'm just asking, there was an item that was up for introduction that looked like it was the last part of the emergency shelter funding. And I think it was referenced in other meetings, but I just wanted to know if that was something that the coalition or that others were planning to support in that meeting. I think it's the same. I think the youth money is in that allocation, but if Alexis has jumped off, I can follow up later.
Alexis is back on. Alexis, there was a question from Nancy Burke about the appropriation before the Assembly on 2/21 for emergency shelter, and if there's a need for testimony on that in your perception. And if that is correct, the appropriation that includes TAY.
It does include TAY. So it is the operations for the Alex Hotel, the lease of the Alex Hotel, operations at Sullivan Arena, operations at Aviator, and then operations at Covenant House for the additional 25. We always welcome public testimony. I always encourage it. It's your 3 minutes to speak your mind. And so we always appreciate public testimony, whether you're for or against it. We just want to hear from the community. And I believe it was introduced. Yes, it was introduced on the 7th, and it will be open for public testimony, and it will be appropriated on the 21st. Hopefully that answered everything.
Thanks, Alexis. Appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move us on because we just have a couple more minutes. Anything, Owen, on the communications work?
No, we were waiting to hear if there was a recommendation from the task force, either on Arctic Rec or the demob plan, and how we might slot into promoting those or workshopping them with the community. So I think after next week's meeting, we'll have a clear identified next meeting date probably for our groups.
Deal. Okay, and we just heard from the facilities group. So, John, unless you have something else to add on facilities, I think we're done with committee updates. Did anybody else have a question? I see somebody's hand is up. Oh, and is that Alexis?
Yeah.
Belinda, it is me. I just wanted to add that we are planning this week. I'm hoping to get it done by tomorrow, but we'll see how ASD goes. To do the town hall basically at Sullivan Arena to see if people are interested in camping, what their plans for summer are, if they'd like to stay moving through summer, and then how we can best fit their needs. So we're hoping to have it before the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting on Wednesday, but we'll see how Anchorage School District treats us.
Will you be willing to share that information that's gathered with the comms subcommittee, either Michael or just an email of what that summary of what it is, so that we could help guide what decisions of who else we might reach out to or how much other outreach is needed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Nancy had a great idea where we give sticky notes and we let people vote on where they where they want to go for summer. And so I think we're gonna work with the operator Henning over at Sullivan and see how we can get that done. But yes, when we get the answers and we get a synopsis, maybe we do 1 or 2 or multiple just to make sure that we have full coverage on where people want to go. So yeah, I'll be in constant communication with you guys.
Thank you.
Okay. So that wraps up everything that was on the agenda. As I think the primary decision that was made is the group's going to get back together on Tuesday to deliberate on making recommendations on the DMOB plan as well as a potential recommendation on the Arctic Rec Center. Is there anything else that anyone wants to share with the group before we wrap up today? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and your very dedicated participation in this effort. I am very pleased to be a part of this and to get a chance to help you guys. Thank you very much for what you're doing. And we will sign off. Thank you. Bye-bye.